Welcome to another episode of Ask Isaac, your favorite online video advice column using the techniques of horary astrology to answer life's most important questions. Today on the show, we have 3 questions. The first is the weather in Western PA going to be good for sweet potatoes in 2023? The second is, what's the best way to quit smoking? And the third is the collapse of the U.S. empire imminent? Now, these are all important questions to the people who ask them. And if you would like your question answered on Ask Isaac, then drop me a line at plantcunning@gmail.com. Or if you know me personally, then you know how to contact me. Now, the best questions, the questions that are best to answer with horary, are questions that are important to you. Real questions, sincere questions. And yes or no questions. That's what I'm looking for. Also, it's good if you give me an anonymous name. Those are fun. We only have one for this episode. Also, if you would like me to privately answer a question for you, I am offering my services as a horary astrologer for a small fee. So, hit me up. Again, if you are not familiar with horary astrology, use the time that the question is understood by me, the astrologer, and I cast a chart for that time. Then I delineate the chart and answer the question. I use the Regiomontanus house system, which is what my teacher Chris Warnock uses. Okay, so let's get to our first question. This is, will the weather be good for sweet potatoes in 2023? And this is in Western Pennsylvania. So for weather questions, we're going to look at the ascendant, we're going to look at the 4th house, we're going to look at the moon, these kind of things. It's not the same kind of question as a lot of other questions. So one thing that is of note when looking at this chart is that we have 26 degrees Cancer rising. And see that little figure here? That is Lilith. And so what that means is this is where the moon is the slowest. So Lilith isn't a planet per se. It's just the point in the sky, in the zodiac, where the moon is the furthest away from the earth. So this is a wild place, right? It's unpredictable. But Cancer is cold and wet, as it's a water sign. And it's ruled by the moon, so we're going to look at the moon. The moon is in Virgo, here in the 3rd house. And that's also like the local area, right? It's the house of neighbors, of siblings, of short travels. And the moon is in Virgo, which is a earth sign, so it's cold and dry. And then if we look at the 4th house cusp, which the 4th house is like the land. So if you're looking at agriculture, it's like the land. And that is in Libra. So the ruler of Libra is Venus. So we'll look at Venus and see where she is. And she is also in an earth sign, cold and dry, in Capricorn here in the 6th house. The 6th house is also connected with agriculture. Well, it's the house of small livestock, but a lot of horary practitioners will use this for the products of the land. But we're looking for the conditions of the land. So we've got the moon, and we've got Venus. And the moon and the Venus are both in earth signs, cold and dry. And the ascendant is in Cancer, which is moist and cold. And we've got Lilith right there on the ascendant. And I normally wouldn't use or talk about Lilith, but because she's right there on the ascendant, I think it's important to note. So my delineation, my judgment for this chart is that the weather is going to be a little bit unpredictable, but it's going to be a little colder and drier in general than usual. And that's not necessarily good conditions for sweet potatoes. But sweet potatoes like it moist and hot, right? But that's not to say that the weather will be terrible for sweet potatoes, but they might not do as well as they usually would. So that's my judgment for this question. The weather for sweet potatoes in 2023 in western Pennsylvania will not be as good as usual. That's not to say it's not worth planting them, though. Okay, on to our second question. This question is, what is the best way to stop smoking? Obviously for this person. And I would like to say, first of all, that I am not a healthcare practitioner. This is not any professional advice. This is basically entertainment and looking at a chart through the lens of how a horary practitioner would look at it. So I'm not saying that you should do this or that. But looking at this chart, we see that there's 29 degrees of Aries rising. So that's late degrees. This usually means that the querent doesn't have as much control over the situation as they would like to. So the significator of the querent will be Mars, because Mars rules Aries. And Mars is right here in the second house in Gemini retrograde. Okay, so Mars is not in a very good position. Mars is going backwards. Mars is in the second house of finances, money, and so on. Now let's look at the significator of addictions. So addictions is the 12th house. And the ruler of the 12th house is Jupiter, because Jupiter rules Pisces. And you see right here that the cusp of the 12th house is in Pisces. So Jupiter is right here in Pisces, in the last degree of Pisces. And he's about to move into Aries. So Jupiter is pretty strong, essentially. He's in Pisces, which he rules. But he's about to lose some dignity as he's about to enter Aries. He will have some dignity in Aries, though. Jupiter is in a cadent house, however. He's in the 12th house, which is not a very strong house. So he doesn't have as much power as he would, say, if he were in the 1st house, or the 10th house, or the 7th house, which are angular houses. The 12th house is one of the worst houses to be in. But what this is saying to me is that the addiction is very strong. Okay? But it can be fought. It can be denied. Because it doesn't have as much power as it has had in the past. And it is losing power. So let's also look at the moon, because the moon is very important too in any delineation. The moon is at 29 degrees Virgo. Isn't this interesting? We've got the ascendant at 29 degrees. We've got Jupiter at 29 degrees, which is the significator of the addiction. And we have the moon, the secondary significator of the querent, and the significator of what's happening, the action. She's also at 29 degrees. This is really interesting to me. And she's in the 6th house of health. So that is important to note too. She's got a opposition, a very close applying opposition with Jupiter. Right? That's also something to note here. And as far as Mars's aspects go, well, he's in a quincunx with Jupiter, very close quincunx. That means he's not being seen by Jupiter. They're not seeing each other. But I don't look at those minor aspects as much. Okay, so to answer this question, let's look at a few things. The first is that the querent, the person asking this question, is not in a very great position. They're moving backwards. It's a difficult thing to do. They've probably been smoking for a long time. The addiction has a tremendous amount of power. But this moon is opposing Jupiter, right? That's a good indication, actually, that this is an obstacle that can be overcome. This is what's occupying the querent's attention and their actions. This is a very important thing to them right now. Now, the moon is in the 6th house. That means this is a potential of causing health problems, which we all know that smoking causes health problems if it's not addressed. We're looking at Mars in the 2nd house, which is showing that this habit is costing them a lot of money, right? This is negatively affecting their monetary resources. But what this is also saying to me, Mars retrograde in the 2nd house, that the best way to stop smoking would be maybe to stop buying cigarettes, right? Because cigarettes are movable property, and you're spending money on them. So looks to me that a decent strategy would be to stop buying cigarettes. And if you can do that, then that's a good way forward. Okay, so let's look at our third question. Is the collapse of the U.S. empire imminent? And this is by N times Evan. Thank you for that name. I like it. N times Evan. Okay, so we've got 8 degrees of Taurus rising. So the significator of the person asking the question and of the U.S. population is Venus, who is up there in the 9th house in Capricorn. So to find out the state of the U.S. empire, we're going to look at the ruler of the 10th house, which is the government of the querent. And that's Saturn, because Saturn rules Capricorn, which is on the cusp of the 10th house. So Saturn is right here in Aquarius, 20 degrees Aquarius, so he is strong. He is in his domicile. He rules Aquarius. He's in the 11th house, the house of friends, organizations, wishes, hopes and dreams, that sort of stuff. Not a terrible house. It's not that bad of a house. It's not cadent. It's not the greatest house, but it's not terrible. So what does this say? When we say imminently, what do we mean? Do we mean like this week, this month, this year, this 5 years? To me, it's not going to be collapsing within the next year. I think we're heading for a crisis more along the lines of the end of 2024, going into 2025, when Uranus enters Gemini. So that's my judgment for this chart. Is the collapse of the U.S. empire imminent? No, not within the next year, at least. Saturn is in a great position, relatively. He's not looking like he's about to collapse. Right now, at least. Okay, we've reached the end of Ask Isaac. Be sure to hit me up with your questions. And subscribe and like the channel. And keep on the lookout for another episode. Thank you.